Mel Brooks has no more to prove and no justification for holding back. Nobody anticipated the list that the renowned director, who is renowned for transforming chaos into comic gold, just released. He detested working with the six performers. Yes, he does mean loathed in the most Mel Brooks-esque manner imaginable. Part truth, part roast, all encased in decades of chaos and show business. This list is Mel's brutally honest love letter to the most challenging and memorable people in his life, from celebrities who made him laugh too much to those who almost shattered him with their perfectionism. It's fiery, humorous, and it may alter your perception of some of Hollywood's most well-known figures. Mel Brooks collaborated with many great individuals. However, things became complicated with Dom DeLuise. It wasn't because Dom was lazy or impolite. Mel had a lot easier challenge. Dom chuckled. Great deal. Although it seems innocuous, it became a major issue on site. Dom would burst out laughing if someone made a goofy expression or joked. He was unable to contain himself. He would laugh out loud even during significant scenes. Occasionally, even before the scene began. Claimed that overseeing Dom was similar to babysitting. Each line needed to be performed 5 times. And at times, Dom would already be laughing when Mel yelled and took action. They collaborated on a number of movies. Dom starred in Spaceballs, Robin Hood, History of the World Part 1, and Silent Movie, Men Wearing Tights. The same thing happened in each film. Dom's laughter would interrupt the take. It drove me crazy, Mel remarked. So, dude. Mel once remarked, he would jump out of his chair, cover his face, and gasp for air as if he had just heard the funniest joke on earth. And the amusing part? Even his own jokes were not making him chuckle. He was responding to the others. It was over if you put him next to Harvey Korman or Madeline Kahn. Just one glance, and Dom would snap. Dom only had one line in a scene in History of the World. One. However, Dom collapsed when Madeline arched an eyebrow. He spent 45 minutes laughing. Until he calmed down, the crew had to wait. Mel began altering his approach to filming scenes with Dom. He did his best to keep the camera away from him. He ensured Dom didn't come into contact with other actors, whatever it takes to keep him from laughing. It was never very successful. Mel stated, "Once we got a clean take, it was comedy gold, so I couldn't fire him." The thing about Dom was that he was clever as well as irritating. He had the ideal timing. His enthusiasm made every scene better, and he was spot on when he eventually stopped giggling and said his lines. In spite of everything that happened, Mel and Dom remained friends. They were almost off camera. Dom frequently brought pasta to the set since he loved to cook. He joked around with the crew as if they were all family and fed them. Mel, however, continued to gripe in jest. He enjoyed narrating stories of Dom's impossibility. Dom responded, "I cut more times with you than any other actor." And he was the cause half the time. Mel claims that he detested working with Dom, but it was out of love. Dom was a delight in life but a nuisance on stage. Everywhere he went, he made people laugh. Perhaps too much. Mel, however, was aware that no one else possessed that kind of spirit. Even though they were complete opposites, it managed to work. Everything slowed when Dom started laughing. He kept the crew waiting. In addition to trying Mel's patience, he improved the movies. Mel was aware. Everyone was aware of it. Mel claimed that although he botched scenes, he still produced the films. Mel Brooks has no filter now that he is 98 years old. He tells the truth while reflecting on his career. Dom immediately sprung to mind when asked who he detested working with. Mel couldn't help but smile as she spoke. There was never really hate. It was the kind of animosity you get when your best friend is making you crazy. It is brimming with affection. Every set was a shambles because of Dom DeLuise. Takes were wrecked by him. Everyone had to wait for him. But he was also a comedian, always on screen, always off screen. Mel detested that, and he cherished that. Dom is on the list because of this. To Kahn, Madeline Kahn was consistently cited by Mel Brooks as one of the most gifted individuals he had ever collaborated with. Few others were able to match her ability for timing, humor, and sharpness. However, she also drove him insane. They collaborated on some of his greatest movies. She starred in History of the World Part 1, Young Frankenstein, High Anxiety, and Blazing Saddles. She gave standout performances in every movie, but behind the scenes, things weren't always easy. Madeline had a reputation for being extremely picky. Every detail was very important to her. She did more than simply read the script and do as she was told. She dissected objects. She changed things. Almost everything was questioned by her. She requested a rewriting if a line didn't feel correct. She pointed out costumes that didn't look right. She wanted everyone to live up to her lofty expectations. Mel claimed that she was frequently late on the set. The staff would be prepared. They would put up the cameras. They would wait. She was composed, grinning, and acting as though nothing was amiss when she eventually entered. Mel went bananas over this. But it was difficult to remain angry once the camera started rolling. She never failed to deliver. She portrayed Lily Von Stupp, the worn-out singer with a flair for the dramatic and blazing saddles. It became a classic role. Mel claimed that filming those moments was difficult, but people still quote her lines today. She was always trying to make the scene work differently. She would revise her language, attempt different delivery, and occasionally even recommend adjustments for the other actors. Frequently, Mel thought he was merely attempting to stay up with her. At one point, he revealed that he had requested her to rehearse a passage in the same manner. "I've found a better way," she said. Even though Mel acknowledged that she was frequently correct, it was still difficult. Young Frankenstein experienced the same thing. Elizabeth, the main character's spoiled and theatrical fiancée, was portrayed by Madeline. She was ideal for the position. However, the procedure was anything from simple. She requested additional takes. She asked for various camera angles. She even argued over lighting selections. Mel claimed that although she made each scene twice as difficult to shoot, the final product was twice as good. It was also observed by crew members. They frequently murmured that Madeline was incredibly intelligent. Directing her was like attempting to wrangle a cat in a rainstorm, Mel once remarked. But he continued to cast her. It said a lot. Mel had the opportunity to collaborate with numerous different actresses, but he consistently returned to Madeline. He was aware that she had something unique to offer. Her timing, facial emotions, and voice all contributed something that no one else could. They had an odd friendship. Despite their mutual respect, they frequently disagreed. There were calm days. There were a lot of arguments on other days. Madeline desired command. Mel desired speed. The best was what they both want. Mel once said that because she didn't like the couch her character had to sit on, she forced him to redo an entire scene. He initially believed she was being challenging, but he eventually acknowledged she had a point. On camera, the new couch appeared better. On camera, He acknowledged that such instances were annoying, but they also demonstrated her attention to detail. She had the ability to make everything about her character, he added. She desired for her scenes to be memorable. She desired to be heard. On set, that occasionally led to friction. Her decisions, however, frequently improved the scene when the final cut was assembled. Madeline's personality was strong. She didn't give up. She struggled for what she knew she desired. She was difficult to work with as a result. However, it also made her memorable. Mel does not mince words at the age of 98. He stated that he detested working with 6 performers, including Madeline, although he made it apparent that his animosity stemmed from frustration rather than distaste. He claimed that although she made his work twice as hard and pushed him too hard, she produced outcomes that no one else could. He recalled the long waits and the mayhem, the never-ending arguments, but he also recalled the situations that endured over the years, the chuckles, and the clever takes. It wasn't easy being Madeline Kahn. She was one of the greatest, but she was also demanding, late, and opinionated. She made the list for that reason. She was the type of challenging person that made things better, not because Mel genuinely detested her. 3. Hackman, Gene. Gene Hackman and Mel Brooks collaborated just once. Even though it was only a brief stint, it made a big effect for young Frankenstein. Gene came from a whole other world, yet he was an excellent performer. According to Mel, their personalities simply weren't compatible. One of the film's funniest parts featured Hackman as the blind hermit. Despite being brief, the scene became into one of the most well-known. It was full of awkward politeness, timing, and slapstick. Mel claims that although the scene made people giggle for years, it wasn't nearly as much fun to film. Hackman's somber roles were well known. He was an Oscar winner already. His style was dramatic and powerful. He did a lot of preparation. He expected everyone else to approach the assignment with the same level of seriousness because he took instructions seriously. That was not Mel's typical approach to things. Mel liked working quickly. He enjoyed unexpected chuckles and loose moments. Actors were urged by him to experiment on the moment. Energy, not perfection, was what he liked. But that didn't sit well with Hackman. He desired a well-defined plan. From the first take to the last, he wanted the scene to remain unchanged. Mel described Hackman as having a very strong tone on set. He wasn't impolite. He was a professional. However, he did not relish the mayhem. Hackman maintained his concentration as Mel and the crew joked and laughed in between takes. He was not a big joker. No matter how ridiculous his role was, he took it very seriously. There were a couple minor arguments throughout filming. Hackman occasionally requested further rehearsals. That slowed things considerably, Mel thought. Mel thought a little chaos enhanced the comedy, but Hackman also wanted to make every shot perfect. Despite having distinct approaches, they both wanted the scene to work. Mel expressed his admiration for Hackman's work. Working with him was like attempting to perform jazz with someone who was reading from a textbook, he said, but he also described him as smart and brilliant. Their rhythms were so unlike. The scene worked well in spite of the strain. Hackman's performance was hilarious. It all worked. The character's gentle benevolence, the physical humor, and the timing. The audiences adored it. Mel acknowledged that although the process was challenging, the outcome was priceless. But they never collaborated again after Young Frankenstein. Mel stated that reintroducing Hackman into his untamed world was illogical. Hackman enjoyed playing the role. However, Mel's settings were too loose for him. He enjoyed being in charge. Mel enjoyed being free. They were both aware of it. Mel said that Hackman agreed to work on the movie out of courtesy. He asked Gene Wilder if there was a role for him because he had wanted to pursue comedy for a long time. Mel was glad to have him on board. He says he was taken aback when Hackman first asked. He didn't believe Hackman would be interested in appearing in a silly black and white comedy. Yes, he replied. However, that sincerity was evident on set. Mel claimed that Hackman remained true to his character while the rest of the cast made jokes. He disliked squandering time. He disliked retakes when other actors burst out laughing. When Mel revealed that Hackman looked at him each time someone ruined a take, he laughed. That expression suggested, if nobody can remain professional, why are we doing this? It wasn't rage. It was simply a different way of thinking. Drama is where Hackman came from. Comedy is where Mel came from. Though not usually in tandem, both approaches were effective. He claimed to have learned something from the event. Not every outstanding actor is the same. Some people excel at comedy, some require accuracy, and some, like Hackman, transform the whole room with their energy. People still adore the Young Frankenstein scene. Today, it demonstrates that even if just once, their disparate styles may mesh. It also demonstrates that high stress can occasionally lead to wonderful comedy. For Cloris Leachman, Mel Brooks held Cloris Leachman in the highest regard. She was frequently referred to as one of the best actors he had ever collaborated with. On screen, she was bold, intelligent, and talented. However, she caused him more headaches than nearly everyone else behind the scenes. They collaborated on History of the World, High Anxiety, and Young Frankenstein. Part 1, she always brought something strong to the part. However, she also brought disagreements, many of them. She put him to the test. She offered several options. There were instances when she simply disregarded his directions and went about things her own way. Mel went berserk over that. At one point, he compared managing Cloris to attempting to ride a peeling horse. She was vivacious. She was focused. She disliked being told what to do, though. She would follow her own path if she thought it was superior. Regardless of what other people thought, she portrayed Frau Blücher, the eerie housekeeper with a secret in Young Frankenstein. The part became legendary. Everything about her performance, her voice, Dre Putty Fime Fuis, her gaze, and the way she said her lines was flawless. However, Mel claimed that it was difficult to get there. Cloris's idea of the character was different. She desired Frau Blücher to be more somber and dismal. Mel wanted her to have an odd warmth and be amusing. That caused them to argue. Mel and Cloris' opinion was lacking something more profound in the character. Cloris was overanalyzing it, Mel thought. They always argued, yet they were never rude or loud. One thing Mel would say. Cloris would retort. They would then take her in another way. Her version was sometimes more effective. At other instances, Mel had to plead with her to give it a try once. He claimed that she wore him down with her incessant questioning rather than her ranting or drama. She inquired about each line, action, and response. Before she could perform, she had to thoroughly comprehend her character. Mel acknowledged that it slowed things down, but he also respected that. In one point, he claimed that Cloris turned every scenario like an argument in college. She wished to investigate every feeling and motivation behind a single look. That made her appear powerful, but it made Mel's task more difficult. It was the same story in High Anxiety. She portrayed Nurse Diesel, an odd and domineering character at a deranged hospital. Once more, her performance was unforgettable. She argued with Mel about direction and tone once more. She believed the role needed less confusion and more control. Mel wanted the opposite. He liked fast-paced, unconventional stuff. Clarice wanted them tight and focused. They continued to argue even though neither was incorrect. According to Mel, Clarice had a glance that let him know she didn't believe what he was saying. She would simply look at him until he complied. He did occasionally. At other instances, he remained firm. In any case, he claimed the scenes were excellent. Mel continued to cast her in spite of all the tension. It said a lot. He was confident she could produce. He was confident that the outcome would make the effort worthwhile. However, he never forgot the amount of work required to get there. Offset, they had a friendly but aloof relationship. Although they did not spend much time together, they enjoyed one another. She was in her own universe, Mel claimed. A universe filled of deep emotions, thoughts, and questions. For that, he respected her. However, he also acknowledged that he needed a siesta following a full day of filming with her. Einshaw, he once made a joke about how dedicated Cloris was and how, if she felt it would have benefited the scenario, she would have performed her part without saying a word. She was unconcerned with accolades or screen time. All that mattered to her was the character's honesty. Mel stated she was amazing because of that kind of focus, but also draining. She didn't tolerate anything. She didn't cut corners. She gave each and every take her best effort. She forced him to justify his decisions. She asked him about his fashion sense. She made him think more deeply. And that made her memorable, even though it also made her exhausting. She wasn't hated by Mel. He detested the fact that she was usually correct. She put his patience to the test, yet she never failed him. Pryor, Richard. Richard Pryor was the only actor Mel Brooks had in mind for the starring part when he first began filming Blazing Saddles. Richard was ideal to Mel. He was bold, intelligent, and unvarnished. He was not scared to go where others would not, and he had a keen sense of humor. However, things did not go according to plan. Blazing Saddles was co-written by Richard Pryor. His fingerprints may be seen in every line of the film's audacious humor. His edge gave the narrative a sense of realism and audacity. He recognized the ridiculousness of racism and the ability of comedy to dismantle it. His concepts took the movie to new heights. Mel claimed that Blazing Saddles would not have been the same without Richard. Richard was chosen by Mel to play the main character of Bart, the black sheriff who enters a bigoted community and completely upends everything. He was considered for the job, but the studio rejected it. They were afraid. Richard was known for something. He had a reputation for being erratic. He struggled with dangerous substances. He was absent from meetings. He occasionally arrived late or not at all. He was not trusted by the studio to carry the film. Mel was instructed to find another person. Mel campaigned for Richard to remain in the movie. Richard was the project's soul, he told the studio. He claimed that the meaning of the narrative came from Richard's humor and viewpoint. However, the studio refused to change. It was too dangerous, they said. It broke my heart, Mel remarked. Richard comprehended the choice. However, the pain persisted. He had invested his time and imagination in a movie he supported. He now had to watch someone else fill the part that was intended for him. Cleavon Little, who did a fantastic job, was ultimately cast by Mel. In the role, Cleavon contributed charm, timing, and control. The portion was his own. However, Richard's portrayal of Bart in Blazing Saddles was a constant thought for Mel. He claimed that Richard possessed an uncontrollable wildness. Every moment felt exhilarating and perilous because of something in his eyes that was hidden beneath the surface. Thought Richard would have added something even more potent to the motion picture. Mel realized the studio had a point, though. It was difficult to work with Richard. There were occasions when he arrived late for writing sessions. At times he failed to appear. You never knew what mood he'd be in, Mel added. He was fantastic one day, full of ideas and jokes. He was either silent and preoccupied or absent the following day. Working with Richard was like waiting for lightning, Mel once remarked. It was beyond your control. It was impossible to plan. But it was unforgettable when it struck. The actual writing process was disorganized. The atmosphere was crazy as Mel collaborated with a group of authors, including Richard, on the script for On the Blazing Saddles. Thoughts were flying everywhere. Until they started crying, people yelled, quarreled, and laughed. The film's tone was molded by Richard's enthusiasm and candor. He contributed to the creation of daring and startling scenarios. Richard, according to Mel, gave the film its bite. Mel never questioned Richard's ability in spite of the mayhem. He referred to him as one of the most talented comedians and writers he had ever encountered. However, he added that Richard was a world unto himself, a universe that is both full of genius and suffering. That was when Richard was fighting his demons. He had a chaotic personal life. He had a fast-paced, occasionally erratic career. Mel needed someone he could rely on during filming, but he also wanted to contribute. Ultimately, he was unable to take that chance. One of Mel's greatest regrets was that Richard was no longer the star. He claimed that although Richard's face did not remain in the movie, his voice did. Richard was the source of the humor, the tone, and the bold storytelling. Nevertheless, Mel wished he could have shown him the screen. After the movie, they remained friends. Mel never harbored resentment. He held Richard in too high of regard. He viewed him as an artist who occasionally defied the rules of a film set. However, he also witnessed the harm that accompanied such liberty. 6. Anne Bancroft. Mel Brooks frequently remarked that his wife, Anne Bancroft, was the most challenging actor he had ever worked with. She was more than just a talented actor. She was shrewd, forceful, and unafraid to voice her opinions, and things quickly became extremely real when they collaborated on To Be or Not to Be. Mel and Anne had been wed for more than 40 years. They had a strong and enduring affection. However, that did not imply that they were forgiving of one another when the cameras were rolling. Working together actually revealed aspects of them that most people would never notice. As co-stars, their main project was To Be or Not Be. Anne played the primary role, and she also produced and starred in it. Set during World War II, the film was a remake of the 1942 original. It combined political, dramatic, and comedic elements. Both the movie and the arguments were audacious. Afterwards, Mel claimed that directing Anne was more difficult than directing anybody else. Not that she was untalented. She was more talented than the majority of actors he had encountered. The issue was that, rather than treating him like her director, she regarded him as an equal. Didn't hold back on set. She expressed her dislike for a line. She voiced her opinion if she believed a scene wasn't right. Whether Mel had planned it out or written it down didn't matter to her. She voiced her own opinions and beliefs. Anne never let him get away with anything. Mel claimed, and she immediately informed him if his direction didn't make sense. She would raise an eyebrow and inquire as to what kind of emotion he was requesting in a scene. She would then cross her arms and wait for him to provide a genuine response. He acknowledged that she occasionally frightened him, but not because she was cruel, but rather because she was astute and always one step ahead. She was the one actress. He was the one actor. Quipped who made him question every note he gave. While filming, they frequently clashed. They fought fiercely, but never loudly or cruelly. When Mel requested a particular line delivery, Anne would counter that it wasn't authentic to the role. She would want greater depth, while he would want more vigor. When the two of them became involved, the staff soon learned to back off. However, the scenes came out nicely in spite of all that strain. The whole movie was improved by Anne's strength and grace in her part. The plot worked because of her chemistry with Mel, her timing, and her facial emotions. According to Mel, Anne had a remarkable talent for identifying the truth in every sentence. She gave the conversation a sense of realism even when it was absurd. She wasn't a comedian. She played for sincerity. And the humorous bits were frequently enhanced by that candor. Things calmed down off set. Their arguments were not taken home with them. Mel once said that they were remarried the moment they left the studio. He would prepare tea for her. She'd inquire about his day. It was game on, though, as soon as they returned to the set. Mel enjoyed making jokes about how challenging she was. He referred to her as the most resilient actor he had ever worked with. In addition, he said that she was the most clever, the most attractive, and the one who could shatter him with only one word. He related stories of how she would look at him after reading one of his lines and ask, "Really?" She would then give him a glance that caused him to question everything he said. However, she would mentally rework it and deliver it flawlessly each time. Anne encouraged Mel to improve. In ways that no one else could, she pushed him. And if that made filming challenging, it also strengthened the film. Even if their collaboration on To Be or Not to Be was tense, it also demonstrated how much they trusted one another. Mel was aware that Anne wasn't attempting to assume command. Her only goal was for the movie to be as good as it could be. Mel also desired the same thing. Mel Brooks is not being mean when he claims that he detested working with particular actors. He's acting like Mel. The true meaning of hate is not present. It's more akin to the type of annoyance that results from working with exceptionally talented individuals who make you feel crazy. Creative turmoil was the foundation of Mel's profession. Quiet, controlled sets were never his style. He flourished in scenes that took crazy turns and amid craziness. And performers who contributed unadulterated, erratic energy. The folks that pushed him the most were those on his hate list. They gave him memorable performances, but they frequently questioned his decisions, wrecked takes, arrived late, or quarreled over lines. Consider Madeline Kahn, who questioned each page of the screenplay, or Dom DeLuise, who was unable to stop giggling. Every aspect was a point of contention for Cloris Leachman. Gene Hackman was very serious about everything. Though he contributed brilliance to the writing room, Richard Pryor almost took the lead. Additionally, his wife, Anne Bancroft, never allowed him to prevail in a dispute on the set. They were not battles between adversaries. These were the growing pains of successful partnerships. These actors weren't despised by Mel. He held them in high regard. He thought they were admirable, and he adored them in many instances. However, they made his task more difficult. They resisted, and that resistance improved the work. Mel truly means that these were the performers he would never forget when he refers to them as the actors he detested. They made an impression. He made comedic history thanks to them. Which performer caught you off guard the most on this list? Leave your choice in the comments section Like and subscribe, and hope that you don't become a target of Mel Brooks. A frustrating take is something he never forgets.